Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video, and in today's video we are talking about armor. Brand new exotic armor, and also how the armor stats are going to be changing in Destiny 2. Gone are the days of intellect, strength and discipline, at least from what we've seen thus far. So if you do enjoy this video, then a like would be super appreciated, and also comment down below, let me know what you guys think of these fancy new exotics and also these new changes to armor stats. Now, to begin with, let's talk exotics. Everyone loves exotics. If you play Destiny, exotics are one of the most exciting things to get a hold of, whether it be through a quest, a random boss drop, or even from our good old friend Zur. Well, at the beginning at least. Now he sells the same old rubbish week in, week out, but that is Destiny 1. Destiny 2 is going to have a plethora of new exotics, both armor and weapons. I've already done a video on all the currently known exotic weapons, which I have conveniently linked down below in case you guys missed it and want to check it out. But now I want to talk about exotic armor. During the gameplay reveal in the Vidoc segment of the presentations, where we got a better look at the new Destiny 2 worlds we'll be exploring, we also got a look at Guardians sporting some rather outlandish gear. Gear that is, let's be honest, far too ornate to be something you'd buy from a vendor or get as a random engram drop. The first one I want to talk about is this pair of exotic Titan Gauntlets. We know they're exotic because they showed up in the very particular segment where Luke Smith mentioned exotics in the Vidoc. They were piled with the other weapons too. But we also know, in this particular case, that it's the gauntlets that are exotic, not just because they have huge Minotaur-style horns protruding from the pauldrons, but also because the rest of the armour is the exact same set that this Titan is seen wearing from the official Destiny 2 press screenshots, the only difference being the gauntlets. So I'm going to assume that these gauntlets are the ones that belong to the set. But, jumping back to the exotic for a moment, these are honestly some of the coolest looking gauntlets I've seen in a long while. The energy infused tips makes me think that these may well be void focused exotic items, something that would benefit maybe the new Sentinel subclass. At this stage it is far too early to even begin to guess what it might do, since we have very limited knowledge of the Sentinel subclass outside of what we've seen, but if it say lets you throw your shield further or more frequently, then I would be all for that. It's also interesting to note that the shader matches here, and while that was most likely a conscious choice by Bungie when putting together this ensemble, it could also go lengths to show that once again, exotics do indeed colour with shaders, which is cool. Speaking of which, we also know next to nothing about shaders right now, since that page was locked off during the hands-on gameplay, so here's hoping for an improved shader system in Destiny 2, perhaps even stemming over to our weapons. But anyway, back on track. That is an exotic pair of Titan Gauntlets. Next up, we have what I'm going to assume is an exotic Hunter helmet. The focus is initially on the helmet, and then the camera slowly pans down, but when you look closely at the rest of the armour, everything else seems to match as if it's part of a set. So, pairing that with the fact that the helmet is quite striking, then it's pretty safe to assume the helmet is the exotic in question here. As is always the way with Hunters, the hood makes it pretty hard to see much beyond the face, but this appears to have some sort of energy visor, not too dissimilar to the Night Stalker's Graviton forfeit, only this one has gold energy. I do, however, like how it matches quite nicely with the gold trim of the hood and the rest of the gear, but beyond that, there's really not much we can say about this one. It looks cool, but it's not the most striking thing we've seen to date. However, on the topic of striking, now let's move over to the Warlock. This is an exotic chest piece, and holy crap, this looks awesome. Borderline over the top. You've got this set of grey robes complete with ornate gold patterns all over it, some sort of ruby and pendant on the chest, and then on the back, you've got wings. I mean, if it wasn't enough that you Warlocks can now sprout wings with your fancy new Dawnblade Super, you just had to go one step further and put them on your exotic too. Nice. I'll always be a hunter at heart, but damn, this does look cool. Again, if I had to hazard a guess, given the wings, I'd be willing to bet all my strange coins that this has a perk that benefits the Dawnblade subclass. Quite what, I have no idea, but the similarity just seems to make sense. Now, that's pretty much it for the exotic armour. There were considerably more exotic weapons shown than gear, but it was still nice to see those three nonetheless. And even outside the realms of exotic, the general armour seen in the gameplay in the Vidocs was still pretty cool. So here's hoping we have a vault big enough to hold all this new gear we're going to be collecting. Now, just before I switch over to talk about the changes to armour stats, I do just want to read an extract from an interview with Mark Noseworthy that discusses Bungie's stance on exotics going into Destiny 2. He said, quote unquote, "There is something really special about those Year 1 Yalahorn stories. Then there's something really nice about the determinism of the Taken King, where you can go to do this thing and you'll get Sleeper Simulant. Just go do it, it's hard, but you get it. We're going to be somewhere in the middle. Both those stories are pretty cool. We want exotics to be something that all players can get, not something that only elite guys who put in thousands of hours to get exotics can acquire. Exotics are a really special part of Destiny. They are guns or armor that actually change the way you play. The sandbox game, the moment-to-moment combat, is now different because of this thing that happens in my gun, or a perk on this armour. We want everyone to have that experience, so in some ways we are going to democratise exotics a little bit more, but we still want there to be things that are hard to get and will be highly sought after. So in summary, expect exotics to still feel special, but also be more accessible at the same time. If they want everyone to be able to experience how awesome they are, then I'd be willing to bet a large portion of them will be things we can go out and find. I've already spoken about this in another video, but the new treasures icon that shows up on our map, I bet these will yield exotics. If they link lost sectors and treasures so that you have to go and find a lost sector, complete it, get a key, and then use that to find the corresponding treasure in order to obtain the item, then that would be pretty sweet. It'd actually bring back the feeling of kind of adventure that we first had in The Taken King, where the Dreadnought was full of hidden chests and mismatching keys. That being said, I do still hope there are a few RNG exotics kicking around, as frustrating as it may be not to get an item. I mean, I didn't get my Yalahorn until the Dark Below, defeating Crota. There is, however, no better feeling than getting it to drop, but I trust that Bungie will do their best to maintain the excitement of obtaining them, and of course also making them accessible. Now, moving away from exotics to talk about armor stats, or gear stats. Destiny 1 players will be familiar with this, but our existing gear works around an intellect, discipline, strength model. Intellect reduces the cooldown on your super ability, discipline reduces the cooldown on your grenades, and strength reduces the cooldown on your melee ability. However, in Destiny 2, that is a thing of the past, and again, this is likely a conscious decision to help with Crucible balance moving forward. The weapon changes to kinetic energy and power, grouping a lot of the previous problem weapons into one big power category. The power ammo changes, switching over to a model where only the person that picks up the ammo gets it. The fact that supers are now a lot more precise, meaning you have to be more thoughtful with how you use them, as opposed to just activating it and pressing RT or RB to win. All of that, paired with this new gear change, should create a more balanced environment. See, without the ability to spec into intellect, discipline or strength, then gone are the days of having our super much faster than someone else, or our grenade or our melee. All those abilities now fall under a global cooldown. Sure, you can still get your super faster if you work well as a team, generate orbs, or do especially well in the Crucible, but generally speaking it means that people will have access to those abilities at a much more uniform rate. I'm sure there will be armor pieces to perhaps give us double grenades or melee as we've seen in the past, or generate more orbs. And if the gear that we had equipped during the hands-on gameplay reveal was anything to go by, then there still will be perks to help us increase recharge rate of abilities or things like that, but I imagine they'll be much more uniform so as to restrict the end result. Now, gear revolves around an armor, agility and recovery model, which I personally think makes much more sense. Armor increases the amount of damage you can take before you die, agility increases your movement speed and maximum jump height, and recovery increases the speed at which you regain lost health. Now again, for any of you Destiny 1 players out there, you'll know full well that these stats used to fall under our subclass trees. You would select the nodes accordingly depending on whether you wanted more armor, agility, recovery, or a more balanced model. Putting this into armor now means you can actually gear to be more tanky or more agile or have more recovery. It's also worth noting that Bungie did say the subclass trees we saw in the hands-on demo were not final. It's my understanding they will have a few extra nodes in by the time the game launches. Exactly what those will be, again, will remain to be seen, but given their attempt to try and keep things balanced, I very much doubt that we tie back into the previous stats from Destiny 1. If anything, it might well be the exotic gear that we look to for a boost in that direction, but again, that is just a possibility. For the time being, however, that is pretty much it. That is a look at 3 new exotic gear pieces, plus an explanation on how the gear stats will be changing. Unfortunately, we weren't able to inspect the gear during the hands-on time, so we still only have a surface level understanding. We were of course able to see a couple of perks, which again leads back to what I mentioned earlier, where there are still perks that reduce your ability cooldowns or your grenade recharge rate, but since they're individual gear perks and not gear stats that can be spec'd into, I'm going to assume the end result is much more predictable. 1 or 2 pieces of gear with a static grenade recharge perk are much easier to balance or plan for than someone going tier 12 and speccing fully into their desired stats. But again, this early on, things are still in flux. Perks can change, stats can change, but this is what we have to go on right now. What I will do to round out this video is to just very quickly scan over the armor pieces for the Hunter, Titan and Warlock that we had a chance to test out during the gameplay reveal. That way you guys can see a couple of the perks that do appear on the armor, like the ones that I spoke about that reduce your grenade recharge rate or your ability recharge rate. But again, expect this to be much more in depth when we actually have a chance to dive deeper into the gear. For the time being though, if you enjoyed this video, then a like would be super appreciated. Let me know your thoughts on these new system changes in the comments down below. And take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.